Hi everyone, welcome to the grant management presentation for Texas Parks and Wildlife's Community Outdoor Outreach Program. If you're viewing this presentation, that means you were recently awarded a CO-OP grant. Congratulations! CO-OP is a very competitive grant program and we receive far more applications than we can support each year. We look forward to partnering with you over the next 18 months. This video will review the programmatic requirements to effectively manage your CO-OP grant. Not all grant partners have received government funds before, so you may not be aware of some of the stipulations that come with those grant dollars. This training will provide an overview of these expectations. Remember, if you have any questions along the way, CO-OP staff are here to help. As a reminder, CO-OP's mission is to provide grant funding to tax-exempt organizations for programming that engages underrepresented populations in TPWD mission-oriented outdoor recreation, conservation, and environmental education activities. Since diversifying audiences and mission-related activities is the core of the grant intent, we keep this in mind when evaluating projects. Unlike foundations and other private funding sources, government grants originate from community tax dollars. Specifically for CO-OP, our program funds are derived from a portion of the sporting goods sales tax. This includes tax received on camping, hunting, fishing gear, kayaks, etc. Therefore, Texas Parks and Wildlife must follow government regulations when administering grant funds to the community. The Texas Grant Management Standards is a set of financial management procedures and definitions that state agencies must follow when awarding grant dollars. It's operated by the Texas Comptroller. If you're familiar with federal grants, this document is Texas's version of 2 CFR 200. CO-OP was created in 1996 by the Texas Legislature and was identified in Chapter 24 of the Parks and Wildlife Code. Chapter 24 is our guiding statute that dictates our program's purpose and intent. Luckily, you don't need to know all the specifics of all these different documents. For this program, we have created a CO-OP program guidance document for grant sponsors, which outlines the expectations and requirements specific to applying for and managing a CO-OP grant. Much of the materials covered today are found in the CO-OP program guidance document. The program guidance document is found in our online grant management system called Recreation Grants Online. We often refer to it as ARGO, which is the same system used to submit your application. Once you log in, you can access these resources by clicking the ARGO resources link in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. This page will appear. Make sure to click on a link specific to the CO-OP grant program, since we have many different other grant programs in our department. Here you will find resources such as training presentations, the CO-OP program guidance document, and templates helpful for reimbursements. You can also click on the ARGO Awarded Active Projects resources to find videos on how to use the system and how to access certain documents within the system. First off, we'll start with the grant agreement. This document is used to outline the specific scope of work for your organization. To access the grant agreement, click on the Applications link in the top left-hand corner of your screen and find the current grant project. Once you click on that project, the main screen appears, which lists your application documents and your grant agreement. Click on the Agreement Signatures link near the bottom. This page will include a link to the signed grant agreement near the bottom, which we will review in just a moment, as well as the attachments linked to the agreement. Attachments include a budget summary, logo use agreement, the CO-OP program guidance, which we just talked about, and the assurances for state-funded awards. At the time the grant agreement was signed, you also signed the logo use agreement for our agency. This agreement gives you permission to use the Proud Partner logo for any grant-related items such as brochures, education materials, supplies, websites, etc. It's important to note that you may only use the Proud Partner logo seen here, and you're not able to modify this logo in any way. Please do not use any other TPWD logo for this grant. The agency asks you submit a proof of the logo to co-op staff for approval before printing materials. Logo files can be found in the resources section of Recreation Grants online. Now let's go back to the grant agreement. If you clicked on the link at the bottom of the page, you would find the finalized grant agreement signed by both parties. This is the legal document used to outline the project's scope and requirements. At the top, you'll find basic information of the grant, such as the project number, name, period of performance, and grant amount. The period of performance outlines when all eligible grant actions may take place. It's important to note that all purchases and all activities must fall within this range. If activities and purchases took place before or after the grant period of performance, they will be disallowed. The state shares the total amount of grant funds awarded to your agency. Unfortunately, you may not request additional funds over this amount. Then we head down to Section 1 of the grant agreement. This is the primary scope of work description for your project and is used to determine the deliverables if your deliverables were met throughout the grant. The performance goals will be listed in your quarterly reports as well, where you will describe progress throughout the grant based on these goals. Performance goals were taken directly from your submitted application unless we worked with you individually to modify your grant goals. While this section is a summary of your scope of work, keep in mind the proposed application is referenced in the grant agreement and you're expected to implement the project as proposed in the application. The number of unduplicated participants served and the related demographics are outlined as well. This is derived directly from the submitted application. Unduplicated participants is the actual number of individual participants served, meaning if you had participants attend multiple events, they are only counted once as unduplicated. The primary objective of this grant program is to diversify audiences engaged in mission-related activities. Therefore, the participant demographics are key in determining if we're meeting our mission. If less than 40% is listed for that particular demographic, you don't need to track or report that demographic. If 40% or greater is listed, you are expected to serve the percent amount listed. It's important to note that you must have a means of collecting and reporting this data for actual participants served and can't use the rough estimates used in the application. For instance, if you coordinate an after-school program and the estimated demographics provided in the application use the school's data where students are recruited from, you must report on the actual demographics of the participants as they may not necessarily match the school's overall demographics. You are not required to submit your backup documentation when reporting demographics. However, you must maintain these records internally in case your project is ever audited. Co-op grants are very competitive and points were awarded to your organization based on these grant agreement requirements. If you can't deliver the proposed aspects outlined in the agreement, you may not have received a grant during the review process. Therefore, if you do not complete the project as proposed or serve the demographics listed here, you may not meet the terms of the grant agreement. If it's small changes, such as visiting a different state park than outlined, it won't be a problem at all. But if the primary aspects of the scope are missing, you may be considered in non-compliance. Then we move down to Section 2 of the grant agreement. This will outline any special conditions included in the agreement. These can include disallowed expenses or activities that we remove from your scope of grant. The rest of the agreement outlines the legal requirements for accepting an award. If you have any questions on your grant agreement, don't hesitate to contact co-op staff listed in the agreement. Here's a reminder of the eligible and ineligible activities allowed. This list is provided in further detail on the program guidance document. Some of the common disallowed activities include special events open to the general public, such as festivals or Earth Day events, tournaments, traditional sports such as baseball, soccer, and football, and so on. Please refer to the program guidance document for a much further list. Now we're going to switch hands over to the approved budget. The approved budget is part of your grant agreement and is the guiding document for receiving reimbursements of eligible activities. To access your approved budget, find your current project application and click on the Project Budget Details link located here. Depending on how many items are listed in the budget, it may take a little while to load, so please be patient. Now we're looking at the approved budget. It's important to note that not all items may have been approved. Only the items with amounts listed in the approved TPWD cost column will be allowable for reimbursement. Some items may have been disallowed from your proposed project, so review this section very carefully. In addition, staff may have revised certain line items to make things easier down the line for our reimbursement auditing staff. So if you listed individual items in great detail, such as climbing ropes, harnesses, carabiners, helmets, etc., we may have condensed those lines into a simplified rock climbing supplies line item. This will benefit you greatly as less budget revisions may be needed later on. If you need a printer-friendly version of the budget, you can click on the Print Version button located on the top right-hand side of your screen. As a reminder, you can only seek reimbursement items listed in the approved TPWD column of the budget. If there are items missing from the budget, you do have the option to request an amendment to revise the budget, which I'll cover later on. Here's a list of common disallowed items, which is also found in the Co-op Program Guidance document. A few common items that we often disallow include marketing materials, construction expenses, since we have different grant programs that typically cover construction, prizes and certificates, sales tax is a very common item that we disallow, and storage buildings. Again, refer to the program guidance document for the complete list of allowable and non-allowable costs. Now we're going to move over to amendments. As mentioned earlier, amendments are available to revise your current scope or budget. These options include extending the period of performance. You have an option to extend the grant for an additional 6 months if needed. Unfortunately, we can't extend for longer as grant funds do expire within our agency after 2 years. So keep this in mind that if you receive an extension, you will not be able to reapply for grant funds in the following grant cycle, as projects must be closed out before you can apply again. Changing the project scope. If you've had extenuating circumstances such as COVID-19, hurricanes, something major like that was out of your control, that significantly impacts the ability to complete the project as proposed, we can work with you to amend your scope. Since grants are scored competitively, significant scope changes are rare unless one of these really significant events happens. Typically, we will not allow amendments to key requirements such as participant numbers served, demographics, and performance goals, since really those are the basis for why this grant program exists. Last, we come to budget revision requests. These are by far the most common and are the only amendment that does not require signatures for both parties. If you want to purchase an item that is not already listed on the approved budget, you can request a budget revision to add the item to your approved budget. It's best practice to complete this budget revision before the item is purchased, as we may not approve the revision. Budget revisions must be fully completed before you seek reimbursement for that item. How do you request an amendment? To request an amendment, find your current grant project in Recreation Grants Online. Hover over the status change link in the top left-hand corner, then choose Amendment Revision Request in Process. It's important to know that once you click the status, you will not be able to submit a reimbursement request until the amendment is fully executed and approved. That's one of the challenges of our current system that we have. Reimbursement documents are calculated using the approved budget, and when you begin an amendment, you're requesting to change this budget. Therefore, the amendment must be fully completed before you can submit the next reimbursement request. Once you've status changed it, a new option will appear in your Forms menu. You must click the Amendment Revision Request link that appears at the bottom of the screen. Now the amendment request form will appear. Choose which type of amendment you're requesting. When requesting to add a budget item, make sure you include the item to add, the cost of that new item, and which existing items will be decreased to offset the cost. Once complete, click Save, then hover over the status change link in the top left-hand corner and submit. Once staff complete their task internally, you'll receive email notification if it's approved for next steps. A few things to remember. Your total grant award will not increase with amendments. Be sure to let us know which existing items on your budget will be decreased to offset the cost. If you're just moving funds from one existing line item to another, you do not need an amendment or any sort of approval from co-op staff. If it's a significant change, like you're moving most of your budget into one item that wasn't listed there before or that was existing there, reach out to co-op staff before doing so, because sometimes that can have some red flags associated with it. It's highly recommended to request budget revisions before the item is purchased. There's no guarantee that that item will be approved, so it's best practice to add it to the budget first to ensure your organization won't eat the cost if it's not approved. Remember, the item must be added before reimbursement is requested. Extensions and scope change amendments will require a signature from your authorized representative, meaning a person who is authorized to revise grant contract terms. Budget revisions don't require a signature, and you'll receive an email once the item or items have been added to the budget. Finally, changes in key grant agreement requirements may not be approved. If you're requesting a scope change, reach out to co-op staff first to discuss if the amendment is actually needed or would be allowed if you even requested it. Now we're going to shift gears over to reporting requirements. Throughout the life cycle of the grant, you'll be required to submit reports to provide co-op staff with an update of your project. Reports are required quarterly, no matter if you've had any participant activities or not. Reports are due on July 15th, October 15th, January 15th, and April 15th. A comprehensive final report is due no later than 45 days after the end of the grant period, but you are more than welcome to submit the final documents whenever you have completed project activities. That way you can close early and you don't have to complete any later quarterly reports after that. Quarterly reports become available on the first of the month prior to the due date and will appear in the My Tasks section of your main screen in Argo. On quarterly reports, you'll be asked a series of questions such as progress or challenges you've experienced during that period, or what is needed from grant staff. Next, you'll need to provide a snapshot of your participants served and their associated demographics. This snapshot should reflect the entire grant period, since you'll submit the actual to-date numbers. This allows grant staff to determine if you're on track to meet goals by the end of the grant. Next, you'll enter the activities completed during the quarter. Please know that in this section, you only need to include activities during the quarter that you're currently reporting on, so you don't need to duplicate activities that you've submitted in previous reports. You'll list the date, type of activities such as volunteer day, summer camp, after-school program, etc., the location, number of participants served, and the recreation activities included. If you received a co-op grant in the past, this section is replacing the former Excel document that was uploaded with each quarterly report. If you coordinate a program that hosts the exact same type of program with the same participants, such as an after-school program that meets daily, then you don't need to include each day the participants met. Instead, you can break it down weekly or monthly and include all recreation activities and participants that you serve during that week or month. However, if you run a program that serves different participants with very different types of activities, like one week you hosted a camp out, the next was a field trip, next week was a Project Wild lesson, it's preferred that you break those activities out separately. For questions on how your particular program should break out activities, don't hesitate to contact us. Be sure to click the Save button often as you complete the quarterly report, as the system can time out if it's not saved for a while. Then you lose all of your data, and that's no fun. Once complete, click Save one last time, then hover over the Status Change link in the top left-hand corner to change the status to Submitted. When submitted, grant staff will review the report and will follow up if they have any questions. Now on to partnerships. While we absolutely love partnerships and truly believe they are crucial in administering programs, they can sometimes complicate certain aspects if projects are reporting on the same activities as other co-op projects. If you are partnering with another co-op grant partner who received a grant in the same year or received a grant in the previous year, there are a few stipulations you must follow. You may not provide financial resources derived from co-op grant dollars to partnering organizations that have an open grant. This is to ensure some organizations aren't receiving grant funds from multiple co-op grant sources at the same time. In addition, no participants or activities should be duplicated or counted twice between the two organizations, meaning only one organization should claim a partnered event on their quarterly report. It's the responsibility of the partners to determine who will claim the event in your scope of work. For questions about overlapping projects in your specific situation, again, don't hesitate to contact co-op grant staff. As mentioned earlier, reporting will be compared to your grant agreement and initial application submitted to determine if all requirements have been met. If awarded a grant, your organization is eligible to reapply for grant funds every 2 years as long as no extension was received. This is to ensure that your organization will not have multiple co-op grants at the exact same time. If grant requirements were not met, grant staff will notify you during the closeout process, and a scoring deduction may be in place when applying for future co-op grants. Scoring deductions ensure fairness and accountability, as this is a competitive grant program paid with community tax dollars. Factors that may trigger a deduction include not spending all of your grant funds. If you leave a little bit of money on the table, that's not a problem at all, as the minimum threshold for deduction usually begins around $1,000. Next, we have unfulfilled project elements or grant agreement requirements. This includes not serving target audience or not completing certain aspects of your scope of work. Next, if the sponsor is unresponsive to TPWD requests for information. So if we've requested multiple times for clarification or a specific document to be uploaded, you may receive a point deduction since you are unresponsive to our requests. And finally, you'll receive a deduction if reports are consistently missing, late, or incomplete. If you have one report late, don't worry about it. You're not going to receive a deduction. But if you start having multiple reports late, then a deduction will be in place. These deductions will be imposed on projects closed within 2 years from the new application deadline. And that's all I have on the programmatic side for you today. Congratulations again for becoming a TPWD grant partner, and we cannot wait to hear about your work within the community. We're so excited about being able to support the activities with participants. If you have questions on any of the topics covered, please don't hesitate to contact co-op staff, and my information is listed here. Good luck, and life really is better outside.